I have a lot. Yeah. I don't have serious. And I don't want.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is 5:30 p.m. and the live stream has begun. You may begin your meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. I see we have quorum. I call this meeting, public meeting under the Planning Act in session on Wednesday, October 11th at 5:30 p.m. As always, at the beginning of the meeting, we have a land recognition statement read, and tonight I have the privilege. We begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. And acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. And now I turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to our opening remarks. If you'd allow us a moment to share our screen. Public meeting under the Planning Act, Wednesday, October 11th at 5:30 p.m. The Town of Pelham is holding hybrid public meetings. A hybrid meeting includes a mixture of in-person and remote attendance and participation. Please note that no decisions have been made prior to this public meeting. The Planning Department will be providing a presentation regarding the subject applications. Decorum. Public meetings under the Planning Act are formal meetings requiring decorum. This means that all comments are to be made through the chair. If you have pre-registered to speak virtually or will be participating in person, you'll be given the opportunity to address the committee at the public portion of the meeting. If you're live streaming and wish to submit a comment live, please email clerks@pelham.ca. Please note that comments must be received during the public portion of the meeting. Inappropriate comments will not be tolerated. If decorum is lost, the meeting may be recessed and persons asked to leave. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the planner responsible for the application in writing as soon as possible. Contact information will follow on the presentations. Contact information is also available on the Town of Pelham website. Mr. Mayor, that brings us to item number 3, being adoption of the agenda. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrand that the agenda for the October 11th, 2023 public meeting under the Planning Act, special meeting of Committee of the Whole, be adopted as circulated. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any discussion on this motion? Not seeing any. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? None opposed. That motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to item 4, being disclosure of pecuniary interests.
Thank you. After looking at the agenda, does any councillor have a disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof to declare? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to item number 5, and I'll read the opening remarks. Town of Pelham application for zoning bylaw amendment, 56 Fillmore Boulevard, file number AM-07-2023. A zoning bylaw amendment to permit residential accessory structures 7.5 meters from the rear lot line. The Planning Act requires under Section 34 that council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of the proposed amendment. The public meeting has been called to satisfy this request. Notice of this meeting was provided by prepaid first-class mail to all persons who are listed as owners in the last revised assessment roll within 120 meters of the subject property on August 23, 2023. This notice provided information on the properties and the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. In addition to providing information, we will also receive any comments which any member of the public may wish to offer. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the clerk or planner in writing as soon as possible. Contact information is available on the Town of Pelham website and will be displayed on the last slide of the staff presentation to follow. If any person or public body would otherwise have the ability to appeal the decision of the Town of Pelham to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but they do not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the Town of Pelham before the bylaw is passed, they are not entitled to appeal the decision. In closing, we stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed amendment, and therefore any comments received will be considered by council. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have our town planner, Shannon LaRock, with us in the meeting, and Shannon will be joining us via Zoom.
Oh, excellent. Ms. LaRock, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This public meeting is for property located at 56 Fillmore Boulevard, and the application is for a zoning bylaw amendment. 56 Fillmore Boulevard is located on the north side of Fillmore Boulevard, just south of the Niagara Escarpment Plan area. And the application would allow a reduction to the current rear yard setback requirement of 15 meters and allow it to be reduced to 7.5 meters. That would allow the location of sheds, garages, pool houses, swimming pools, decks, and those types of residential accessory structures to be located 7.5 meters from the rear lot line. And this image depicts the rear yard setback reduction that's being requested. You can see the current requirement at 15 meters and the requested reduction at 7.5 meters. And this concept plan was provided by the property owner. It shows his intentions for the rear yard of this property. He plans to construct an in-ground pool as well as a pool house.
It's not showing up on the screen. Oh, there it is.
Sorry, Shannon, your presentation wasn't appearing. We can share our screen on our end
that's
for
okay.
you. Can you just let us know
Should I
what
just
slide
say
you're on?
next slide then?
Yes, if you could. What slide did you end up on?
Sure. I was on the concept plan slide. If you
Perfect.
could, to slide number 4, please. Thank you. And next slide, please. In the provincial policy statement, this property is considered to be within a settlement area. And with the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, this property is within the delineated built-up area. Both of those designations support residential uses and, of course, residential accessory uses. Next slide, please. In the Niagara Region official plan, the property is designated delineated built-up area. This property is also impacted by the region's natural environment system, consisting of significant woodland along the rear lot line. And Niagara Region Official Plan Policy 3197 requires the completion of an environmental impact study when there is development or site alteration proposed within 120 meters of a significant woodland. Next slide, please. The Town of Pelham Official Plan considers this property to be within the Northwest Font Hill Secondary Plan area, and it's designated low-density residential special policies. This designation allows for large lot, single detached dwellings that are constructed in an environmentally sound manner, and it includes protecting the educational and scientific value of the surrounding landscape, that being the escarpment. Policy B1624A requires that all development proceed on the basis of the recommendations of an environmental impact study. And Town Zoning Bylaw 4481/2022 zones this property as R1-64. And the request is to rezone this property to a site-specific R1-128. That would be a consistent zoning with, I believe, 5 other properties that went through a zoning bylaw amendment about a year ago with the same request. Each of those property owners wish to locate sheds and pools within their rear yard, and were only able to do so if they could have a reduction to that 15-meter requirement. And so they had gone together in a group and come before council at the time requesting a reduction to the rear yard. This property owner has recently acquired this property and so was unable to come forward with the original group and is now making this application independently. Next slide, please. And the comments that have been received on this application include no objections from the Niagara region. And that is provided that the recommendations of the scoped environmental impact study that was provided with this application are implemented to the satisfaction of the town. No other objections or comments were received from commenting agencies, and no comments were received from any members of the public until this time. Next slide, please. A planning justification report, as well as a scoped environmental impact study and a stormwater management assessment were provided in support of this application. Digital copies of those reports are available on the town's Engaging Pelham page on the 56 Fillmore Boulevard project page. No decisions or recommendations are being made about this application tonight. Once staff have had an opportunity to review all of the comments that have been received and the application materials, we will prepare a recommendation report for council's decision at a later date. And if anyone wishes to receive future notices, please provide your contact information to me. There should also be a sign-in sheet available in the council chambers, and please add your contact information to that sheet if you wish to receive notices. And any questions or comments can be sent to either myself, Shannon LaRock, Senior Planner, slarock@pelham.ca, or to our planner, Andrew Edwards, whose contact information is on this slide. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, Ms. LaRock. I turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have the agent for this file, Nick Godfrey, joining us via Zoom, as well as the applicant, Angelo Unelli, also joining us by Zoom. Please allow Jody a moment to let them into the meeting. Excellent. Nick, you are in the meeting with us. Jody, if you wouldn't mind also letting in Angelo.
Can you hear me?
Very slightly. You can proceed whenever you're ready.
Let's check again. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Okay, Nick, you have the floor.
Thank you. I prepared a presentation. Okay, if you can please put up my presentation, Sarah.
Yes, absolutely.
So my name is Nick Godfrey. I'm a planner with Better Neighborhoods, and we've been retained on behalf of the landowners to represent them for this zoning bylaw amendment. Next slide, please. So Shannon's already done a fairly fulsome job of explaining the application, but I'll just quickly run through our slides just to give a quick overview of what we're seeking to do here. So the subject site is located at the north side of Fillmore Boulevard, which is just south of an area, a natural heritage feature, and with a stable or a slope erosion hazard directly abutting the property to the north. Next slide, please. The purpose of the application is, as Shannon mentioned, to reduce the proposed or the required setback from 15 meters to 7.5 meters. And this is done so that the applicants can make full use of the amenity space in their rear yard to construct accessory structure, or in this case, to construct a pool house and a pool within the 7.5 meter setback. There's no proposed development that we're looking for at this time in the 7.5 meter setback to the rear property line. Next slide, please. So as Shannon mentioned, council approved the same application on behalf of 5 other landowners at 30, 54, 64, 66, and 68 on last year. And as mentioned, the landowner bought their property after this application was made and are just seeking to have the same permissions granted to their property that were given to these other landowners. Next slide, please. In support of the application, the applicant prepared a scoped EIS that was done to the satisfaction of the commenting agencies, the region, the NPCA, and the town. And the results of the EIS are that the 7.5 meter setback is sufficient and for the landowner's use and will not cause any negative impacts to the surrounding environmental features. Next slide, please. So the EIS recommends the installation of permanent fencing at the rear property line And what this means is that a fence with no gates so that it can inhibit access to the environmental features at the north. And it also recommends the preparation of an ecological brochure, which is intended for neighborhood circulation as an information package on the ecological significance of the features directly north. Next slide, please. So just a quick summary of what we're looking for in the zoning. As mentioned, we're looking for 7.5 meter setback rather than 15 meters. The 15 meter setback was established in cooperation with the NPCA, and that it's set at the established stable top of slope. So the 7.5 meter setback that we're seeking, we're hoping to have relief for on this property will not impact the stable slope allowance. There was also an EIS prepared in support of the previous application and this application that were in support of the amendment. As Shannon mentioned, there was a stormwater assessment that was prepared in support of the application that the proposed development will not negatively impact the existing stormwater management systems according to the approved stormwater management plan that was enacted as part of the original plan of subdivision in 2013. And we also have provided an approved grading plan that will show that there will be no negative impact to grading that will impact stormwater or have any negative impacts to the environmental features. Next slide, please. So again, we're just looking for the 7.5 meters in order to support the enhanced enjoyment of the client's rear yard amenity space. There are existing regulations and mechanisms in place to protect the environment, including no encroachment into existing servicing easements, and that there is no obstruction of overland flows or filling of swales. There are drainage easements registered on title, and there is, these will prevent or they do not allow development in these areas. Additionally, there are further environmental protections proposed, including the fencing at the rear lot line with no gate access, which my understanding will be required as part of an MPCA work permit, the distribution of the ecological brochure, and the servicing easements, the drainage easements, as mentioned, there's no building within 1 meters of the side yard to protect the existing drainage swales. Next slide, please. So this is my presentation. Again, just to look at the site, you can see the 7.5 meter setback and the 1.5 meter easement as a prohibited area for development. So the proposed area is that the dashed area within the interior of the site and not the 7.5 meters to the rear property line. I'm available for questions, and that is my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you for your presentation, Mr. Godfrey. Did the landowner himself want to speak or not? Shannon, I see you on the list.
He is in the meeting with us, but I do see that it's muted and its video is off.
Ah, okay. Very good. In that case, I turn it back to the deputy clerk.
Thank you. Oh,
Sorry about that. No, we're fine with Nick's presentation. Thanks for your time today.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to the public portion of the meeting. We do not have any pre-registered members of the public for this file. If you'd like to invite members of the gallery, you may.
Any comments from the gallery? No. Okay, going once, twice, 3 times.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do see that it is 5:48 p.m. and we've received no emails. Therefore, you may move to committee input.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Any member of the committee have comments on the application? Now I turn to Councillor Wink.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the applicants. Talking about a fence in the back, I'm not sure if I recall correctly, but the other ones that were approved last year, were they chain link fence or were they wooden fences? Was there a specification on those?
I will turn to the Director of Planning, perhaps, Ms. Weens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, they do also have fencing requirements, and it doesn't matter if it's a chain link fence or a wood fence. It just can't have a gate through or access through to the natural area.
Okay, thank you. Just one further comment. I was involved in the previous 5 properties, and I have no concerns with respect to this application.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for that, Councillor. And Ms. Luak, I'm sorry, I probably should have went to you on that. I'm sorry. Councillor Nesnick.
Thank you. Yes, good evening, everyone. Yes, this would be a question, just a clarification, I guess, for Shannon and or the applicant with regards to the side easement, the 1.5 meters. So he mentioned about no building 1.0 meters on that easement area. Should it be 1.5 though?
Shannon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
There is no construction permitted within the easement at all. So on that side, it will be 1.5 meters. On the other side, though, where there is no easement restriction, it's 1 meter in which is the requirement of the zoning.
Perfect. Thank you. I just wanted that clarification.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Not seen any. I turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to the presentation of resolutions. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink that committee receive report 2023-0204 for information as it pertains to file number AM-07-2023, and that committee direct planning staff to prepare the recommendation report on this topic for council's consideration. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry.
To you for discussion and a vote.
Oh, okay, sorry. Any further discussion on this application? Okay, not seeing any. Call the vote. All those in favor? Okay, none opposed. The motion carries.
Excellent.
To
Thank
the
you.
clerk.
I have a motion put forth by Councillor Kerr that committee receive the applicant's presentation for information. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, any further discussion on this motion? Not seeing any. Call the vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Niznik that committee receive the written correspondence as listed on the agenda. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, any further discussion on this motion? Not seeing any. Call the vote. All in favor? Motion carries.
Excellent. Thank you. And I would thank our agent and applicant. And Ms. Legros, you can put them back into the waiting room. That does bring us to item number 6, and I will now read the notice requirements into the record. Town of Pelham Housekeeping Zoning Bylaw Amendment, file number AM-08-2023, Housekeeping Zoning Bylaw Amendment. The Planning Act requires under Section 34 that council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect to the proposed housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment. This public meeting has been called to satisfy this request. Notice of this statutory public meeting was published on September 21st, 2023 on the town's website and social media platforms, on the Housekeeping Amendment project page on Engaging Pelham, and posted on the Voice of Pelham website at pelhamtoday.ca. Additionally, a copy of the notice was emailed to all interested stakeholders who had provided contact information during the creation of the town zoning bylaw in 2022 via public information sessions, Engaging Pelham, and the public meeting, or through direct contact to planning staff. In addition to providing information, we'll also receive any comments which any of the public may wish to offer. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the clerk or planner in writing as soon as possible. Contact information will follow on the presentation as well as the Town of Pelham website. If any person or public body would otherwise have the ability to appeal the decision of the Town of Pelham to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but they do not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the Town of Pelham before the bylaw is passed, they're not entitled to appeal the decision. In closing, we stress that at this point, no decisions have been made on the proposed amendments, and therefore, any comments received will be considered by council. And Mr. Mayor, we do have our policy planner, Lindsay Richardson, with us this evening.
Excellent, thank you. And you have the floor.
Does it stay? Thank you. Let's see if I can get the share screen to work properly here. So far, so good. Thank you again. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors, fellow colleagues, and members of the public. My name is Lindsay Richardson. I am the policy planner with the town. And tonight I'll be providing an overview of a town-initiated housekeeping amendment to our comprehensive zoning bylaw. So the town zoning bylaw was approved by the Ontario Land Tribunal on April 3rd of this year, save and except for some site-specific lands that are identified on Appendix A of the decision. And as town staff has had the opportunity to monitor and use the new zoning bylaw, items have been identified for change to clarify regulations, provide consistency, and improve the functionality of the document overall. The proposed housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment applies to most sections of the zoning bylaw, including definitions, parking and land use sections, and affects all lands in the town of Pelham except that area that is subject to Niagara Escarpment Development Permit Control and the lands that are subject of the appeal. And so just in terms of applicable policies and plans, the Planning Act does enable council to pass and consider amendments to the zoning bylaw in order to regulate the use of land and the location, height, bulk, size, floor area, etc. Of buildings. The proposed changes have been reviewed within the context of all provincial, regional, and local policy documents and are in keeping with the policies outlined in these documents. So generally speaking, staff is recommending changes to Section 2, which is our definitions. In that section, we're looking at rewording some of the definitions to clarify, and also the introduction of some new definitions to better clarify or describe uses and terms within the plan. In Section 3, which is our general provision section, staff is looking at some minor amendments to several of these sections, again, to improve clarity and consistency with other policy documents. In Section 4, which is our parking section, we're looking at a reduction in the minimum dimensions of tandem parking so that it is in keeping with the front yard setbacks in the residential zone, and also looking to decrease the number of bicycle parking spaces required for apartment units in terms of short-term parking, which would be located outside of those units. In Sections 5 through 8, which are sort of our agricultural, residential, greenfield, commercial zones, all kind of the standard stuff. We're basically looking at some minor amendments to clarify some setback and height requirements that are more in keeping with current trends in other town documents, and also looking at some minor changes to reflect the policies from Bill 23, the More Homes Built Faster Act. In Section 9, we're looking at modifications to the permitted uses within the EP2 and EP3 zones that better aligns with the policies in our official plan. And finally, in Section 10, which is our exemption section, we're looking at reintroducing a couple of site-specific amendments that were inadvertently not carried forward from the previous zoning bylaw. So these are basically zoning bylaw amendments that have already been approved by council. We're just looking at plugging them back in. If anyone is looking for more information on the specific changes being proposed, they are included in the planning report that you have in front of you this evening, and they're also available on the project page at engagingpelham.ca. Just like to conclude this very brief presentation by thanking you all for your attention, and just to remind everyone that no decisions or recommendations concerning this application will happen tonight. Staff will review the comments received and prepare a recommendation for council's consideration at a later date. And if any member of the public does wish to receive notice, please ensure that you've provided written comments, verbal comments tonight, or provide your contact information to the clerk or the planner as soon as possible. Again, thank you for your participation, and if anyone needs any more information, please let me know. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for your presentation. Should we have questions from committee now or not?
We'll move to the public portion first, and then we'll move to committee.
Okay.
So we do have a number of public speakers this evening. So beginning with our registered public speakers, we have Mr. Stephen Kaiser, and Mr. Kaiser is joining us via Zoom. If you could please allow Jody a moment to let him into the meeting. Mr. Kaiser, you have joined. Perfect.
There you are, Stephen. Oh, well, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
What's that now?
Yes, we can. Please, don't be afraid to speak up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, staff, and those interested parties attending the meeting. As noted, my name is Stephen Kaiser. My wife and I reside on Canberra Road in Font Hill. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening regarding the town's housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment. My comments on our discussion seem trivial in terms of the current world events, and our thoughts go out to those who are impacted. We are reminded what a great country we call home. I'm speaking to you from Victoria, British Columbia, so I certainly appreciate the ability to participate in this discussion remotely. Our company has interfaced with the town in terms of building and land development for the past 37 years. I hope that my comments related to the proposed changes to the zoning are both pragmatic and helpful. I'd like to commend staff, particularly Lindsay and Barb, as they have been receptive to discussing aspects of the zoning bylaw and both the formation of the current zoning bylaw, which replaced a very antiquated piece of legislation, and the changes to the bylaw we are discussing this evening. I will say that I've gone through the site-specific development process interfacing with the new bylaw. Some of the areas that need attention or housekeeping have come to light. One of those specific areas is short-term bicycle parking for apartment dwellings, and I will address that later in my remarks. The first item I'd like to speak about is in the definition section, and that is the definition of height. The new definition reads, height means the vertical distance measured from the average finished grade level to the highest point of the roof surface or parapet, whichever is greater. That change appears to be enabling. However, when I spent the better part of the day this weekend going through the current bylaw, I found a number of inconsistencies with height in the various zones. And in fact, the definition itself may be counterproductive to the actual built form the town is trying to achieve. This may not have come to light as there have only been a few development proposals beyond single-family, semi-detached, and townhouse zones since the inception of the new bylaw. The impact is clearly evident in some of the new zones and that the zoning bylaw has created. The art of zoning bylaw is to achieve a desired built form in a delicate balance between being prescriptive and yet enabling. I believe the current bylaw unintentionally dictates architecture in a form that the town does not intend. By example, in the village commercial zone, the permitted height is 6 meters or 2 stories, with a mandated first floor height of 3 meters. That effectively mandates a 2-story building with a flat roof. In essence, I believe we need to redefine the definition of height more related to the number of floors and the maximum height of the ceiling and the top floor in relation to the average finished grade as now defined. This would not inhibit architecture such as parapets or pitched roofs. In essence, we should set a maximum number of stories and a maximum ceiling height of the top floor in relation to the ground floor. Parapets and roof structures would be beyond the threshold set in the bylaw. The inconsistencies are evident as one goes through the various zones. As we are creating smaller lots, there will be a push to increase height in design. Currently, the R1 and the R2 zones have a maximum height of 12 meters. And yet the village commercial zone has a threshold of 6 meters. This gets a little complicated, however. I believe it is better to mandate the maximum number of stories and then define the maximum height of the ceiling height in the top floor in relation to the average ground level. One would then be dictating the maximum ceiling height in the upper story as opposed to inhibiting the architecture. This methodology could be applied to all of the various zones. If we take the downtown corridor zone as an example, we could set a 20 meter as a maximum top floor ceiling height, in which in terms of 6 stories, equates to 3.3 meters per floor, or 10.9 feet. The institutional zone has a maximum height of 15 meters. If we wanted to achieve a 5-story building, the height would be consistent with 3.3 meters per floor. To be consistent with 3.3 meters per floor would actually be 16.5 meters to the ceiling of the top floor. As the village commercial zone currently has a mandated threshold of 2 stories, the maximum height would then become 6.6 meters, again factored from the top floor ceiling height and not the highest point of the roof or parapet. As I noted, I believe the current definition of height and the related thresholds in the various zones lack consistency and are counterproductive to the built form that the town would like to achieve. That's my opinion. The second revision of the bylaw I'd like to discuss is bicycle parking, and this is certainly minor to the height provision that I've just discussed. I concur with the revisions to the definition section related to long-term bicycle parking in section 4.3.1 as it relates to the location of indoor bicycle parking. I should note that before I go further in this section, both Lindsay and I have compared notes. We are both avid bicycle riders, so I'm certainly not against bikes. I was walking on Hay Street with my wife a few months ago when I got a call from a town planner basically reviewing our site plan for Welland Road. And he told me at the time that we were deficient in bike spots based on the new outdoor bicycle parking spots based on the new bylaw. And I said, well, how many spots do we need? He said, well, equating the 48 units to the number per, the equation per number of units, you need 38 spots outside the front door, which was somewhat surprising. Those 38 spots then would equate to 19 posts if bikes were parked on both sides. We applied for a minor variance, as we did a few other minor variances for that development, to the 0.25 spaces per apartment, which is granted, meaning we now need 6 posts or parking for 12 bikes. I believe this is still excessive, and I will note some examples. I'm currently in a new building, or speaking to you from a new building in Victoria that is 70 units, and there are 4 posts or parking for 8 bikes by the front door. Victoria is the bike riding capital of Canada with active riding year round. The new MCC, expecting 600,000 visits this year, has 10 posts or bike spaces for 20 bikes. I'm told by a senior staff member at the MCC that there's seldom more than 2 bikes in the spots at any given time. The town hall next to your, at the town hall next to your council chambers, there is bike parking for what looks like about 5 bikes. And at the library just down the street, it would be the same situation. Clearly, the number of mandated bicycle spots is too high, especially when there are 0.7 mandated interior bicycle spots in an apartment building. In our building, that would equate to 34 spots, and I'm certainly not opposed to those indoor spots. The same section notes a specific distance that the mandated exterior bike spots must be from the front door. The same zoning bylaw notes that accessible parking should be close to the building, and I agree, or to the front door, and I agree with that language. I question, though, how outside bicycle spots seem to have a higher priority than accessible parking spots. Sometimes the proximity of these features is hard to incorporate on a site that is constricted in size. In conclusion, I believe we need to use this opportunity of housekeeping to take a harder look at the new bylaw and incorporate the comments from all stakeholders and ensure the bylaw reflects the wants of council and the desire to see the respective built forms achieved. I hope as I start at the beginning of my presentation that my comments are both pragmatic and helpful in your review of the proposed changes. Thank you, and I'd welcome any questions.
Okay, Mr. Kaiser, thank you for your input tonight's meeting. I turn to the clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we did have a second registered speaker. However, I see they have not joined the Zoom meeting, so we will move on to our third registered speaker, which is Mr. Maloney. Jody, can you please bring Mr. Maloney into the meeting?
Thank you. Good evening.
Can you hear me?
Yep, good evening, Mr. Maloney. You have the stage.
Thank you. Good evening to yourself and members of council and staff. My name is Patrick Maloney. I'm a partner with the Municipal and Land Use Planning Group at Sullivan Manny. This evening, I'm appearing on behalf of two clients, Mr. Tony Mancini and Homes by Antonio, which the principal is Tony Nuziato. Both of my clients have development interests in the town of Pelham. We have reviewed the town's staff report, and for the most part, we agree that the changes do represent what would be considered minor housekeeping amendments. However, my clients do take issue with the changes to the zoning bylaw as it relates to the proposed increase in lot area and increase in lot frontage for semi-detached dwellings in the R1 zone. This is highlighted in your agenda package at page 65, if you want to refer to it. With respect, we do not feel that these changes amount to a housekeeping amendment. In fact, our clients worked with planning staff as part of the approval of the latest zoning bylaw on these exact requirements, and a compromise, which we felt was a compromise, was reached, and our clients chose not to appeal that zoning bylaw. So in terms of the reasons why, as council is very aware, provincial policies and the general direction of the provincial government is to increase opportunities for residential development in established residential areas. And we feel that these zoning changes will actually reduce those opportunities. There is a push to provide for a greater opportunity for infill situations, which assists the town in meeting its intensification targets, providing a greater range of housing type in the town, and provide housing that is more affordable. And semi-detached dwellings are a perfect example of this type of housing type that would provide for affordable housing in the municipality. So these proposed changes have what I'm going to suggest, the opposite effect, and will remove opportunities for residential development that involve semi-detached dwellings. So for example, if a lot was proposed for 2 semi-detached dwellings, these changes will require 3 additional meters of frontage or 23% more land. That impacts the developability of our client's property. With this amendment, the town in some ways will be stepping back from the rules that were put in place most recently, and stepping back in some ways from the support for infill and residential development within the town. As noted in the planning report, these changes are proposed so they are the same as single detached dwellings, but semi-detached dwellings are inherently by nature smaller than single detached dwellings on smaller lots, which allows people to remain in their own neighborhood, have less maintenance on the lot, but in a more manageable residential situation. You can still have an attractive semi-detached dwelling with a reduced lot frontage and a reduced lot area that is compatible with the neighborhood. And this amendment puts the town in a situation that will reduce those opportunities for this encouraged residential development. So taking into consideration provincial policy and the provincial direction, we ask that council not approve the changes as it relates to increasing the lot frontage and minimum lot area for semi-detached dwellings in the R1 area. Now, with all that said, I think there is a compromise that can be had, and I ask that this council consider approving the balance of the housekeeping amendments, but defer the decision on these 2 requirements until after the town completes its official plan review process. So as you will be aware, the town, as required by the legislation, has to go through an official plan review process because of the region's new official plan, and understand that staff would like I'm not going to hold Lindsay to this, but they're hoping for a draft by the end of this year and potentially bringing it back to council in the first quarter of next year. So it's relatively proximate, even if that is delayed a little bit. So even staff noted in tonight's information report that another housekeeping requirement would be required for the zoning bylaw as part of that OP review process. So while those other housekeeping amendments that are proposed this evening may be considered minor and housekeeping in nature, they are not really impacted by any official plan change. But these 2 amendments to the minimum lot frontage and minimum lot area for semi-detached dwellings are conceivably directly correlated to what will be in the new official plan, which supports more increased opportunities for infill and intensification within the municipality. So it may be determined as part of that official plan review process that these zoning changes are not supportable and should not be made. I don't know, but I think the compromise and the better way of approaching this is to defer the decision on those specific requirements this evening and revisit them in the context of that future housekeeping amendment that would be required to the zoning bylaw as part of the official plan review process. So subject to any questions, Mr. Mayor and to council, those are my submissions this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Maloney, for your presentation. I turn to the clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have no more pre-registered members of the public. However, you may have members in your gallery which wish to make comments. You may invite them now.
Okay, thank you. Is there any attendees in the gallery that would like to speak? Yes.
Yes, if you could please state your name for the record, and we do have a microphone. If you could just turn that on before you speak. It's just excellent.
Craig, as usual, I love your hairdo. Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I always appreciate your humor, and you're welcome. Thank you. And thank you to the balance of council and to staff as well. So I am here tonight representing the Pelham Greenhouse Growers Group, and you will recall that I was before you back in June when council was convening an open house or public meeting for the review of the official plan. And at that time, I provided a presentation to you, and I'll be submitting this in writing to you and the clerk as well, and it will include that earlier June presentation that I made as well. Before I get into this, I just want to talk about the Pelham greenhouse, or the greenhouse industry, basically. In the province, it's a huge industry, right? Employs tens of thousands of workers all through the year. In Pelham alone, millions of dollars in investment by the growers, and then just all of the people that they employ that work in Pelham, and just all of the spin-off from that. I'm going to provide more detail on the economics in the written presentation, but I just, this is a big deal. And I don't think that that's lost on the council or staff, that this industry is a big deal. But there are a number of problems that we have with the zoning bylaw, as I highlighted earlier, and I'm going to do that again. Yes, so we were well received. Jason Waringa spoke at that meeting as well, and council seemed interested in removing the restrictions that were keeping the greenhouse industry from growing. Since that time, I've had an opportunity to speak with Ms. Weens a little bit, and I heard Mr. Maloney talk about timing of the official plan coming forward. If that official plan does come forward later this year as a first draft, you're going to have another probably consultation. Maybe it'll get approved next fall. After that, maybe the zoning bylaw will get amended, by June of 2025. So we're at least a year and a half away from a new zoning bylaw being put in place. And in the meantime, what the town is essentially saying to the developers is, just hold off. Don't worry. We'll get to it. And I don't mean to be flippant about that, but that's kind of the message that they are receiving, because they're not familiar with the whole of the process and the needs that you need to go through in review of Planning Act applications. So with that, I have two requests. The first one is, I think, fairly easy. In Section 2 of the zoning bylaw, there's a definition of hoop house, and it provides a couple of parameters. And then at the end it says, for the purpose of this bylaw, a hoop house shall not be included in the calculation of maximum coverage. So hoop houses, no lot coverage restriction. Greenhouses, 30%. So that's very clear in the definition. But when you flip over to the subsections 5.16 and 5.26, and those are the agricultural and specialty agricultural, it provides definite provisions for both greenhouses and hoop houses, and it says the maximum lot coverage is 30%. Talk to staff. There's no intention of restricting hoop houses to 30%, but I would It's the industry's request that be clarified in 5.16 and 5.26. Again, I think that's pretty straightforward. It's just to avoid any confusion. You know, I was a planner for 30 years in municipalities, and I know that I would say one thing and the next guy that comes along maybe has a different interpretation. And it's easy to say, you know, there's a general thought that when there are two provisions that conflict, the most restrictive applies. So when you look at 5.16 and 5.26, a planner could come along and say, no, it's 30%. I don't care what the definition says. So I'd just like to clarify that. The next one then is about the greenhouses and the restriction of 30% lot coverage. So as I explained in the June presentation, we have the Farming and Food Production Protection Act, the Provincial Policy Statement, the Greenbelt Plan, the Agricultural Guidelines, the Niagara Regional Plan, and even the town's official plan. All encourage all types of agricultural uses, sizes and intensities. That's what the policies support. That's what they say. So, you know, right from the top, let's use agricultural, let's maximize the use of agricultural lands. And much like Mr. Maloney said, you've got the provincial mandate for housing, and then we're trying to, you know, unintentionally putting a stumbling block in the way. That's the way I view this as with the greenhouse operations. You have a 100-acre farm, you can only use 30%, or whatever size the parcel is. You can only use 30% of it for your chosen agricultural operation. To me, it seems restrictive. It seems opposite to what the province says, the region says, and even the town says. So a little bit more about that and the practical problems that the farmers are experiencing is it's an uneven playing field. So while Pelham restricts the use of lands to 30%, internally. So if you have an agricultural operation, you can use all of your property. If you have an outdoor crop, you can use all of your property. Orchards, wineries, all of your property. Greenhouses, 30%. So when a greenhouse industry, or when a farmer is looking to purchase land and he's competing against other types of agriculture, he's recognizing that he can only use 30% of the property. And he can't use all of it like the other farmers. So there is some inequity in their being able to afford the farm. And then in comparison to adjacent municipalities, West Lincoln has a 70% lot coverage restriction, which is the same as Pelham's in the Pelham zoning bylaw. The previous zoning bylaw was 70%. Lincoln doesn't restrict, and St. Catharines doesn't restrict as well. So you could have a farmer that's established on Victoria Avenue right now, and he's on the east side in Pelham. He can only have 30% lot coverage. But you can have on the opposite side of the street, on the west side in West Lincoln, you can have 70%. So it doesn't take too long to understand that while Pelham is saying they support agriculture, it doesn't really look like that when you come to expanding your operation. And it would be easy, relatively easy, for a farmer that's established in Pelham to just go across the other side of the street when he's ready to expand, taking all the tax dollars and technically the jobs. I don't know that that would necessarily happen, but it's just that spin-off effect. So that's the second part of the second problem that we have with just maintaining the 30% restriction is that individual property owners could come forward with a zoning bylaw amendment or minor variance. That would be easy to say. Just apply for a variance and we'll sort it out. We'll figure it out. The problem is that now you are inviting the public in to basically analyze the operation. The agricultural use is permitted, the greenhouse use is permitted, nobody's arguing that. All the setbacks are established, so those setbacks are all in place to ensure compatibility with adjacent property owners. So what are you applying for? You're just applying to make the greenhouse larger. That gives the public a false sense of, a false perception that they're actually going to be able to say, well, the greenhouse should be operated this way, it should be located there. That isn't the intention of the zoning bylaw. So to me, it's a costly exercise, both in terms of application fees and in time. And it doesn't recognize that greenhouse growers are planning a year out right now. right? So if they're planting their crops, what they're going to grow next year, they're ordering now. So if they're building, they're planning 2 years or 3 years from now. And right now they have no assurance that they can actually expand in a reasonable way. So that's basically the two requests. As I indicated back in June, we are exploring the opportunity to pursue the matter through the Normal Farm Practices Board, and we have initiated a complaint in that manner. Ideally, what we'd like to do is work with the town for council to direct that those amendments be considered. But if we have to go through the normal farm practices to expedite it, we hope that council would, again, work cooperatively with us in that exercise as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Otherwise, I'll get out of here and you can roll on with the balance of your agenda.
Yeah, Mr. Larmer, thank you for your presentation. I'll turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you'd like to see if anyone else in the gallery would like to make comments. No? Excellent. Okay, I will just check the pelham.ca email address to make sure we've received no email. And I can confirm that it is 6:25 p.m. We've received no emails. If you would like to move to committee input, you may.
Excellent. Thank you. Speak your on. So after hearing the speakers, we will now open it up for the committee. Any questions or comments they have to the speakers we've had this evening. And I see Councillor Olson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is for Mr. Lorimer. The 70%, I can imagine that it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen to agriculture because everything's changing. And I can imagine that moving more inside because of climate change and all kinds of things. Councillor Kerr would be much better to be able to comment on the future of agriculture, but I can easily imagine that 70% would be a desirable objective as far as competitive-wise, giving us a competitive advantage, or our greenhouse is a competitive advantage. But is there? I guess I'm looking for another reason, and I think I've arrived at climate change and the change in agriculture would more than justify the types of challenges that our greenhouse growers are going to have, and I could justify the 70% in my mind that way.
I'll comment then. Now, no questions for the presenter?
Well, wasn't there a question?
I didn't. I heard a lot of comment, perhaps. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So I'll
best. Perhaps a comment.
Any comments on the councillor's comments?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we're seeing changing technology in agriculture, and one of the things is shade structures and greenhouses for the growing of what has been commonly field crops. The increase in temperature is causing changes in extreme weather events, seasons of drought or excessive wetness, and they're all having impacts on crops. And you will see occasionally structures starting to pop up over berry farms. And I don't know that I've seen a few around here. I know that I've seen them in southern locations as well, where it's just becoming necessary to grow what is, as I said, traditional berry crops under glass or some other type of structure to provide them the higher level of protection. Thank you.
Councillor, back to you.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. For Ms. Weens, I wonder if, what was the rationale for the 30% in the first place?
To the director, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you. So it is because our official plan restricts the coverage to 30%. There's a policy in the official plan that restricts greenhouses to a 30% lot coverage. So the zoning bylaw is to conform and comply with the official plan. And the official plan was, of course, prepared in 2012 and approved in 2014. And at that time, when the official plan was prepared, I'm not aware that this was an issue. But that's the number that's in the official plan. So that's the rationale for the 30% in the zoning bylaw.
Is that, any other comments, Councillor?
No, so the amendment, would we have to amend the official plan, or is that how we do that, 70%? What would be the process for that?
To the director?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Well, as you recall, Mr. Larmer appeared at the public meeting in June when we were talking about the official plan, and he requested that that be something that we consider as part of our official plan review and update. And we've certainly indicated that we would. So now he's asking for the zoning bylaw to also be considered, but it appears we want to do this housekeeping amendment prior to the official plan being completed and updated. So we've got a bit of a disconnect in terms of.
Thank you.
Okay. Before I go to any other council members, Mr. Larmer, 70%. I had a fellow talk to me in a Toronto when Region went there, and he seemed to think that that there was the provincial didn't put any ceilings on it. Is that true? Why 70 as opposed to why not go 80? 85.
Thank you, and to you, Mr. Mayor. The province doesn't apply any restriction, and I said St. Catharines doesn't as well.
Okay.
The reason that we had requested 70 is that is what the previous zoning bylaw.
Okay.
When you put in all of the setback requirements, front yard setback, exterior side yards, if there's ventilation fans on the sides or ends of greenhouses, that typically takes up about 30% of the lot anyway.
Okay.
So it seemed reasonable to ask for the 70%.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you for that. I now will go to Councillor Nesnick.
Thank you. So through you, Mr. Mayor, just to Ms. Wiens, staying on this current topic right for this moment. So does the official plan, does that or does that not include hoop houses?
Mr. Mayor, through you, the official plan does include hoop houses as well as a 30% lot coverage. The way it's worded, just give me a moment. It says the total coverage of greenhouses or hoop houses is not to be greater than 30%. Unless it's subject to a zoning bylaw amendment. So that's the challenge that we have. And when we were doing the previous update to the zoning bylaw, we clarified that hoop houses would not be out of it. That again was a compromise that we made with the Pelham Greenhouse Growers Association at that time. And we indicated to them that when we will address this through the official plan review and update, but we felt it was too much of a stretch to include greenhouses in that because then it would obviously not conform.
To the council.
Okay, thank you.
That's where we're at today and why we're.
So we can't do much about that now with this housekeeping at the moment.
Without amending the official plan.
Right.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Go to Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. I appreciate your presentation. I have a substantial number of I'll call them former clients, because when you try to retire and do things that are in the greenhouse business, I concur with your suggestion that hoop houses and greenhouses are really separate entities, just in the style. In theory, covered strawberries are mini hoop houses, many fields that are used. So in a way, as you're talking, the differentiation being one is a permanent structure, the other one is really not a semi-permanent structure. And I guess that's where the concern comes in relative to acreage coverage. You discussed other agricultural enterprises, but greenhouses are an entity unto themselves in that they produce a permanent structure that physically goes on with footings, with structural items. I don't know of many cattle farms that will cover their entire farm for the cattle to roam underneath. Dairy farms, it's just the building in which milking happens. The animals have free roam over much larger segments of land. So that becomes part of the challenge that I have in following through. I understand where you're going. I know there's also been a huge challenge in the greenhouse industry in particular commodities, that they're finding people that are able to grow the commodity outdoors can do it at a fraction of the cost of greenhouses, relative to the money put in to keep something permanent in a cold climate such as we're in with the vagaries of winter. So I appreciate your comments on what's happened in other municipalities. When I think of greenhouses, I also am fully aware of southwestern Ontario, and if we think of the acres and acres and acres of greenhouses throughout Leamington, Kingsville, and southwestern Ontario for vegetables and how they operate and go, I can understand your comments. Instinctively right now, where I see where we are is that the issue, it sounds minor, but I look at it from the standpoint that right now it's conformity with the official plan. The official plan is the first point of getting the major change, because the greatest challenge that we fight, whether it goes to municipal board or whatever, is does this conform to your official plan? Does your bylaw meet? And if we create two different sets of numbers, as you've said, this just sets a whole other thing in action. So my own thought is in the interim that we go through with this, knowing that the official plan within short order is going to be amended. At that point, the official plan gets amended and we can amend the bylaw as well at a similar time. That's my own instinct of trying to find continuity of making sure A is in step with B, so we don't run into challenges down the line. That's my own feeling. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments on the councillor's comments?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor. No, Councillor Kerr's correct. I understand your position, and that.
Okay.
I have lots of comments on the official plan and conformity of the zoning bylaw, but I'll just leave it.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? I see Councillor Wink.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the director. What steps have to be taken to make an amendment to the official plan, and how quickly can that be done?
To the director.
Mr. Mayor, through you, certainly an application needs to be made for an official plan amendment process.
So who would make that application then?
Well, in this case, it could be the Pelham Greenhouse Growers Association could apply for an official plan amendment. The other option would be if council directs staff to initiate official plan amendment, then we would put it into our work program and attempt to certainly get the work done. You're looking at about a 6-month process in terms of time frame. There's we would have to prepare a draft. There's consultation with external agencies involved, and a public meeting process is involved, and ultimately a recommendation report.
So we're looking at 6 months, so we're into possibly second quarter of 2024. The official plan, what type of time frame are we looking for approval on that?
So again, the official plan, it's a much more comprehensive and fulsome process. We're hoping to have a draft of the official plan kind of available out for public review, January next year, end of this year, January. We would then have something that we would share publicly with all of council, with the community. We'd do a series of open houses. We'd have to do agency consultation on the amendment or on the official plan as well. And depending on the nature of comments that come back, it's an iterative process, because there'll be lots of things that people will weigh in on and that they'll want to see refinements to or other changes made. And that is a back and forth process. And like I said, we will do a series of open houses throughout the municipality. And then ultimately, again, it would be a formal statutory public meeting, presentation to council, and then a formal recommendation. I would expect that process could be anywhere between 6 months and a year.
So it's quite possible that we would be looking for approval in 2025, late 2024, early 2025. Correct. Yeah. So to work with the greenhouse growers, it may be worthwhile going through an amendment to the official plan.
That is a decision of council. You know, the greenhouse growers have certainly been aware of this requirement for quite a number of years now, and to date, they have not initiated an official plan amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wink. Any other comments? I'm sorry. Sorry, Councillor Ackert.
No problem, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I don't know, Ms. Weens, if you can comment on this, but to me it just seems, and I think anybody listening might be looking at this as saying we're looking at approving a zoning bylaw change to correspond with our official plan, which we've had since 2014, only to, in the future, change it so that we can go back and change the bylaw that we're about to approve. To me, it just seems like a negative cycle that we're going through. And if by changing the bylaw to correspond with the zoning, official zoning plan, which I think from the comments I'm hearing that many of the councillors are saying needs to be changed, are we throwing up a potential roadblock in the future to that change to the zoning, the official plan? Are we throwing up a roadblock by putting this in now, in the future?
To the director.
Mr. Mayor, through you, I wouldn't necessarily call it a roadblock in the future. But to, Councillor Kerr's point, we've heard from one side here about wanting to increase the lot coverage for greenhouses. And where that 30% came from, I don't know. I've certainly asked Mr. Larmer of that. He was here at the town at the time this official plan was prepared. And he would have been working with the consultant, who was doing that official plan. And he's not aware of how that 30% number got reached, but there had to have been some rationale for it at the time. Typically, greenhouses, there's a lot of things that you need to consider. It's not just the setbacks. It's like, where are they doing? Where is their stormwater management going? How are they managing that? How are they, you want to be able, you can get maneuverability on that site for large trucks and vehicles that are coming and going. So again, what is the right number for lot coverage? Is it 70%? Is it 80 or 85%, as the mayor may have suggested? Is it 60%? Is it 50%? Those are all the things that we need to kind of look at and evaluate and assess, and we'll need to get some feedback from others. There are impacts that greenhouses have on adjacent properties, and you want to make sure that you're not going to create an adverse impact. And sometimes if you're covering the land too much with something, whether it's a greenhouse or any other building, you can create an unintentional impact. So those are the things that we would look at as part of the official plan review and update, and bring that back to you with some, formal recommendations as to appropriate lot coverage requirement. And then, we would, again, at that time, we could do an amendment to the zoning bylaw at the same time as you're updating the official plan to make the two align. Right now, what Mr. Larmer and the Pelham Greenhouse Growers Group is asking is to go out of step. And the only way you can go out of step is if there is an official plan amendment.
Thank you.
Councillor, thank you. Councillor Kerr?
Yes, I think it's all about process. And process is, the official plan is the overriding one, which is followed by the local bylaws. And if we want to set ourselves up for conflict in terms of if something appeared and the two are out of step with one another, that's how things get taken to, quote, higher levels. In listening to the director's comments with respect to the timelines for the revision of the official plan and everything else. What we're talking about is a difference of, if we ask for a change in the official plan right now, before we've done the rest of the official plan, it's a matter of a few months difference in total timeline. I think it's taking staff and spending a lot of time working on something that is ultimately going to get switched later on in the process. So I'm just looking at having a common sense approach of saying, we're doing the whole package at once. It's part of the whole package. We get all the comments at once and we deal with it. It's much more efficient use of time for everybody in this. If it was a difference of 2 years for the official plan, total amendment versus that, 6 months, yes, I can see an 18-month difference, but for a matter of 3 or 4 months, I think we get the two in a line for the time being. We get the hoop house and and greenhouse fixed for the official plan for the future. I think everyone's in agreement on that hoop houses and greenhouses are really separate creatures. Unfortunately, they're bound together currently, and that we just move forward with this. I appreciate your comments and I understand where you're coming from. I'm just looking at sequence of time and resources and people, and for a matter of 3 or 4 months, I think it's I don't think it's efficient use of time for something that's such a short window that's going to get ultimately changed, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Go ahead, Mr. Lorimer.
Thank you. I agree. I understand the official plan is the parent document. Zoning bylaw is required to conform with it. Totally get that. That applies in several places, and the town has departed from that a number of times in the zoning bylaw. Did it through hoop houses, did it through home industries. There's a number of places in the official plan where it says this use is permitted only by zoning bylaw amendment. Yet, there it is in the zoning bylaw. It's permitted. So the town has done it in the past. I'm not saying that it's good practice. I'm not saying that at all. The town has done that. Twice my name has come up. First in the June public meeting about, oh, Craig, you were the director of planning when this came up. I was not the director of planning when the official plan got approved. I was not.
Okay.
I was relieved of my duties by the town of Pelham well in advance of the official plan getting approved. Greenhouses were not an issue at the time at all. There's only 2 places in all of Niagara where lot coverage policies exist in the official plan, and it's from the same consultant, Mr. Chris Jones. It's here and it's in Thorold. He did both of the official plans. It's very rare for lot coverage of any sort, except for perhaps in a secondary plan, for lot coverage to be recognized or entrenched in policy. So thank you for that.
Excellent. And thank you for bringing this to council's attention. And we look forward to working with staff and rectifying what I think everybody perceives to be a, lack of a better word, a problem. Thank you for that. Any other comments? Councilor Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Ms. Weens. There seemed to be a different approach to Mr. Kaiser was taking towards the heights. And I didn't really understand I can understand stories and I can understand feet or meters, and I had a little bit of trouble understanding what was meant by the idea of the second story height there, whatever. What is the rationale that we're using on establishing the height for the structures?
To the director.
Again, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. The change that we were making with respect to height was the definition. And we included the phrase average finished grade. Right now, it just says finished grade. And when you have reviewing building drawings that are on land that there is a slope and you have a basement walkout, and so forth, like from the basement side, and you have something that says 2 stories or 6 meters or whatever the number is, from the basement, that might look like a 3-story building, but from the front, it's a 2-story. And where is the finished grade? Is it the front? Is it the back? Is it the side? And so this was been a challenge for, doing plans review on building permit applications. So they've asked us for some clarity on how we measure height. And the previous bylaw referenced average finished grade, and they like that because you would take the average around the building and then determine your height. So it's not necessarily what is at the front and not necessarily what is at the back, but it was an average of the finished grade. And so that's why we were recommending this change to the definition of height. The other issues that Mr. Kaiser spoke about with respect to number of stories and then the number of meters assigned to that 6 meters or 2 stories, or is it 6 stories and 20 meters. When you do the math calculation, you will get a difference in the height of each story. And again, in a commercial zone, you expect that the first story will be higher than the second story because they tend to have, 12 or 13 or 14 feet ceiling height in a commercial building, and you don't have that in a residential building. So there was a little bit of mixing some of the height depending on which zone you're in. In a commercial zone, you look at height slightly different than you would in a residential zone. So we can certainly have further discussions with Mr. Kaiser on that, and if there's further areas that we need to clarify and provide that consistency, we're happy to do that. But what we were intending to do through this housekeeping amendment at this point was just change the definition to include average finished grade instead of just finished grade.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if that answered your question or not, but.
It did in part, because I was wondering about like walkouts and things like that, and does this address that? I think I saw that it addressed that.
It does address it, and again, so if you're depending on, again, and we do have varied topography here in Pelham, so it's important that we do kind of address this and get this right, because you can, have somebody here and another house here because of a rolling terrain that we have in certain parts of our communities. So we want to make sure we get it right. And so we're hoping that this will do it, and you can still have a basement walkout, but maybe your overall building height is reduced somewhat, again, to minimize the impact on adjacent land uses.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have another question.
Go ahead.
With respect to Mr. Maloney's presentation, the size of the frontages for the detached dwellings, what's the reasoning behind that?
To the director.
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, so the housekeeping amendment was proposing to increase the lot area and lot frontage for semi-detached dwellings in the R1 zone, and to increase it. I believe right now it's 12 meters, and we're proposing to increase it to 15 meters. And if you were a single detached dwelling, it would be 15 meters. So we had received some feedback from the public on this issue, and there was some concern that the lot area and lot frontage requirements for the semi-detached was too small, particularly in the established residential neighborhoods, and that would have an impact on kind of the character of those neighborhoods. So we've took a look at that, and that's the reasoning or the rationale for making this or suggesting this amendment. But Mr. Maloney and his clients are thinking that the 12 meter for a semi-detached is a better fit and would encourage kind of the infill in the neighborhoods. I don't, we want to encourage the infill, and it's a balance between making sure that the infill is can happen in an appropriate manner and respect the character of the neighborhood.
Councillor? Thank you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. On the same subject, I'd like to make my comments. We've had meetings with the planning director as well on the same issue, because we realize that what staff have recommended, I think, is a better solution than what the Mr. Maloney has requested, because the changes that were made actually apply to existing lots in Ward 3. And it will have an impact. Several of those lots have flipped several times now, and I'm sure that the developer has pounced on the chance of the zoning changes we previously made. And the fact is that the minimum lot size area, if I can define it in more detail what it is, the minimum size requirements to build a semi is less than a single-family home in the R1 zoning. The size requirement for a single-family dwelling is 420 square meters, and a semi is 165 per dwelling, which is 320 for the building. So if you had a lot of 45 by 80, you would not meet the requirements for a single-family dwelling, but you could build 2 dwelling units, semis on them. Also, the R1 zoning requires 460 M2 to build a semi, far greater than R1. St. Catharines, Welland, Niagara Falls, and Lincoln all have their semi-lots and lot area requirements approximately 50% greater than single-family requirements in Pelham. Pelham is 20% less. So it's significant. So I think what staff are recommending, I would highly recommend that we continue. And I know that Councillor Nisnik is going to comment on another issue, but again here it seems like Pelham's revision was slightly more permissive, just like I'm going to state in the following comments we're going to make on the next subject.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Oh, Councilor Nisnik.
Yes, thank you. So, yes, so I would concur with Mr. Hildebrand or Councillor Hildebrand that I like the changes that are recommended by staff based on public input and based on many conversations that we've had. I think it's a good compromise for the folks who do currently live in R1 zones moving forward, that if a semi-detached dwelling is going to go into that lot beside them, they have to live with the same parameters that the single dwelling does as well. So I think that's a good compromise and a correction on the current bylaw. I also would ask staff and council to consider another change, and this is in the institutional zone. It's not before you in writing anywhere, but this is the institutional zone in terms of reference to development of apartment dwellings in an institutional zone. So certainly after reflection of the past development that was approved in the institutional zone, which actually cut up an institutional piece of property and now is going to build an apartment dwelling on a fairly small piece of property, in order to move forward and to try and minimize or deter that from happening, that continued of cutting up pieces of property into smaller lots. I'm hoping that they would consider increasing the lot size from 1,500 square meters to 2,000 square meters. Other towns have that as their minimum lot size for an apartment dwelling within an institutional zone. As well, reduce the maximum lot coverage to 40% and also increase the minimum side yard to 7.5 meters. So those three asks, I guess, for the apartment dwellings within the institutional zone. And I think that would help to alleviate the similar problem from reoccurring in the future. My other ask is that council and staff consider in the RM2, currently the landscape strip is only 1.5 meters. So that's, I'm a little bit, I know I did the metric system, but I still sort of think in feet. So that's about 8 feet or about 8 feet, I think.
No, 1.5 is just over, just
4
over 4.5
4.5 feet. That's right, 4.5 feet. So I would ask that's not a lot of space. If they could, in the RM2, if they could increase the landscape strip to 3 meters, I think that would give a little more space between an apartment dwelling and if it backs up into an R1, R2, or 3 single dwelling unit. It just gives them that a little bit more breathing space to their neighbors. So that's consideration. And then my last one
thank you.
is I just want to clarify, here I highlighted it for you. So in section 8, the commercial zones, where it says town square, the original statement right now says the maximum height shall be the lesser of 14 meters or 4 stories. Then when you go into 8.33 landmark sites, it says there shall be a minimum building setback of 2.0 meters on, maximum height shall be the lesser of 15.25 meters or 5 stories. And then in the explanation, it says the reduction in number of stories is in keeping with the town's official plan policy. So just wondering about that statement in there.
To the director.
Maybe you have to take it away and come back. That's fine too.
Yeah, so I think that was in the town square zone. And so the official plan has a policy right now that speaks to a maximum height of 5 stories, and the zone currently is permitting 6 stories. So we want to reduce that so that it does conform to the official plan, and that anything higher than 5 stories would require a zoning amendment or some kind of variance process. So we're trying to make that consistent or bring it back in line with the OP.
Okay, so then the original section 8.33 should say 14 meters or 6 stories, not 4. I'm just looking at the chart there that's in the.
Has that got a page number?
No.
No? Okay.
Not really.
So in 8.33, this is only for the landmark site.
Oh.
Okay,
So is that, yes, correct, yeah.
That's where the change is.
Page 10 of 14.
Yeah, and so we're reducing it to 5 stories for the landmark site only, landmark locations.
But in the original, it says 4 stories.
Um,
On the chart. I don't know about the,
Okay.
in reality.
Okay, so maybe. So in the town square for landmark site, it currently permits 12 meters or 3 stories, whichever is greater. And then the maximum height shall be lesser of 20 meters or 6 stories. So it's that 20 meters and 6 stories that we want to change this. The chart is, the reference to the numbers in the chart is incorrect.
Okay.
It's a typo in there.
Yeah.
All right, that's because it says 14 and 4. So if it's 20 and 6, then that's correct. That's lovely.
so
Thank
I
you so much.
apologize for that.
No worries. I thought there's just something not quite making
Yeah, that
sense to
didn't
my
make
brain.
sense. I see that now.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Planning. Councillor Nesnick has been spearheading the institutional zone comments, and I totally agree with her. We've been back and forth with staff, the CAO, the clerk, because we were considering putting through a motion right after we had the issue with 105 to try and avoid having this issue come back again. And I think one of the emails we got back defines what we're looking for, because what they said was Pelham's language now is slightly more permissive than any other municipality. And I don't think we want to be more permissive than any municipality on our zoning bylaws. I think we want to be the center of the pack, not in one ditch or the other ditch. You know, what she is recommending, I think, puts us down the middle of the road. So that's why I'm supporting her. I like being on the middle of the road. It's far safe. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Councillor Hildebrand. Any other comments? Councillor Eckert.
I just have one question, not to do with this, but it's in another section, and I don't want anybody to start breathing heavy, but in section on page 62, at the bottom of 62, section 3.24, prohibited uses, new regulation. And it says section 3.25, and in there it says, under the comment section, it says renumbered and a new regulation that clearly identifies that agricultural animals are not permitted within the urban area or in residential zones. Does that not conflict with the bylaw that we passed recently that does allow fowl or poultry in the urban area as long as the lot size is correct?
To the director.
Mr. Mayor, through you. So this was a change that our solicitor suggested we include in the bylaw so that we provide clarity, but we can certainly have further discussions with her. We don't want to have conflict with the licensing bylaw, so we'll certainly have that discussion. Because, yeah, the intent is not to create a conflict.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Councillor Kerr.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. And it's actually was sort of a follow-up to Councillor Eckert's.
A foul?
Pun intended. An interesting thing that had happened, and again, following the media, was that there was an issue with the keeping of guinea hens in Vancouver. And a judge basically lambasted the city of Vancouver on the writing of their bylaw because a woman had been keeping guinea hens as pets, not for raising for things. And he actually ruled in her favor, saying that the bylaw was poorly written, that it wasn't well dictated. My question is that when we start identifying specific animals and using certain terminology, an example being bull or cow, depending on the species of animal, some have, there's cows, a moose, it's a cow. When you go to start, and so I just think that we might want to take a look at it as Councillor Eckert's brought up, and maybe look at a little bit more defining of species per se. It sounds really technical, but it may protect us in the long run of not using generic husbandry terms that are used all over the place, and then suddenly find out someone has decided to bypass us. We found this as, even with the term hen, we had to really hammer that down to what do we mean by hen, because there's a whole bunch of different poultry females that are hens. So it was a matter of making sure that when we allow something, we've specified exactly what it was. Similarly, if we're going to say the keeping of these things, we better be, I'm just suggesting we be a little more specific.
Yes.
Help clarify for everybody. It's just protection for everyone. I don't want to complicate it any more than necessary, but I guarantee you there's someone who's always looking for the loophole.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Although I can also see the other side of it, that when you get too specific, yeah, a fine line to walk there.
Yes. Strange decisions have always come out of British Columbia.
Any other questions or comments on either the speakers or planning in general? Not seeing any, I turn to the clerk.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to the presentation of resolutions. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Eckert that committee receive report 2023-0214 for information, and that committee direct planning staff to prepare the recommendation report on the housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment to the Town of Pelham Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 4481-2022 for Council's consideration. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the bylaws? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk, Deputy Clerk? Oh, so call the vote. All those in favor? Sorry. Motion passes.
Excellent.
Resolution.
Thank you. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrand that committee receive the written correspondence as listed on the agenda, and that committee receive the verbal presentations made by the public. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, any further discussion on this item? Not seeing any, call the vote. All in favor? Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does bring us to adjournment. I have a motion put forward by Councillor Wink that this special committee of the whole public meeting under the Planning Act be adjourned. To you, Mr. Mayor.
No, thank you. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is 7:09 p.m. and you may adjourn your meeting.
This meeting is adjourned. And thank you, Deputy